You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
Joining me now in studio is Liam Martin, Commercial Sales Manager with the Wexford Car Centre. Liam, how long have you been working in the motor trade?
Well, I suppose I'm 7 years over with the Nissan garage there over in the Wexford Car Centre, selling used, new and recently commercial vehicles. But I've always had an interest in cars from a very early age. My father had always had loads of cars around the house. I mean, I was probably driving when I was way too young, but I learned to drive in a field, put it that way. And I decided when car sales were going very well, I decided to try and get into it. And in 2006, an opportunity came along, and I grabbed it with both horns, and I haven't looked back since.
Excellent. Now, back in 2006, you started your career in the motor trade, as you say. Boom times back then, the height of the boom. What was working in a motor trader dealership back then like?
Oh, it was fantastic, really. You know, you had your pick of customers. They were lined up. You were inundated with calls. You were always busy from morning to noon and to sundown. You know, so you were flat out demonstrating vehicles and closing sales. Finance was no option. Finance could be organised in an hour. You could sit down, make an application, and drive away in the car within an hour, or a van. And it was lovely while it lasted, you know. But I mean, like I'm actually selling longer now in recession times than I was in boom times. So they both have their pros and cons.
Now, I suppose specifically, I asked you to come on the show with me this morning to talk about the commercial vehicle market, because it's a market that I haven't looked at through the show up to now, and it's an area certainly that I wanted to get an insight into to see what was happening and what was changing within the market. It's a market that was certainly very hardly hit during the recession itself. When was the first stage, I suppose, when you identified that the recession was on its way from the commercial vehicle perspective?
Yeah, I suppose you'd be looking at maybe the second half of 2008 and certainly into 2009. We used to sell an awful lot of crew cabs, you know, like the pickups, and they were the first one to be hit because there was a substantial amount of money. You could be talking 30 to 40,000 euro, you know, and we would have had a couple of those every month, and then all of a sudden that stopped. And then the business or the commercial started to shrink down significantly. Contracts were lost. People were started to be let off. So there was a knock on from that as well. Like the guys that were in the commercial end of it, the workers, they weren't buying the car then for the family. You know, they were rolling back on that. We couldn't provide finance for them. So really around that time, say mid-2008 and into 2009 is when we noticed it. And then 2009 was a bit of a disaster when everyone kind of went, oh dear, what are we going to do now, you know? And nobody knew where the bottom was at that stage, you know. So that was when we knew that commercials were in trouble.
Just in relation to finance, because we've seen lots of the manufacturers coming out with their own finance plans over the last 12 to 18 months specifically. Lots of them coming out with low rates of finance. But is it difficult to get access to that money? Is there lots of barriers and criteria in place to prevent people from accessing it?
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because a lot of the manufacturers now have their own banking wing, okay, and they fund the car purchases. Now they're not exposed to the property loan books that a lot of the mainstream banks are. Now, don't get me wrong, I mean, the banks are out there lending as well, so the Irish banks are still strong, but our own banks are there to pick up the borderline cases, you know, the guys that had a couple of blips over the years, but are generally good, like, you know, as long as you have a bit of deposit to throw in, you're going to be fine. And, the manufacturers' own banks definitely are more eager to give the money, but the Irish banks are there as well, you know.
From a business perspective, is there tax incentives out there today? Have the government done anything to create a demand for the commercial vehicle market?
Well, there's a couple of the old reliables really. Like, you can write off your purchase against the corporation tax. If you buy an electric vehicle, you can write that off completely in the first year. And then you'd have just the normal incentives, like your VAT incentives. So obviously you pay the vehicle up front, and you claim back your VAT. So that's all in places. And there's, the special VAT rates for road tax and things like that. So I mean, there's not a huge amount there, but what is there is established and works.
Let's pull forward to where we are now in relation to the market itself. Is there demand out there for commercial vehicles, and if so, where's the demand coming from?
Yeah, well, there is demand back again, and we're actually seeing growth again, and we're seeing it specifically from the food industry. So, like bakers, there's an awful lot of bakers in the locality here. We're seeing from couriers, thankfully doing well with the internet age and people downloading or making purchases online. We're also seeing, like, there's craftsmen. I mean, I spoke to an ice sculptor recently enough who was looking at changing his vehicle and getting a refrigerated unit, But there is others, like, we've sold to installers recently. They were, going for a smaller van to replace their bigger one. I mean, all they really needed was some cable and ladders and things like that, So we've seen demand from them, and also, like, from the IT sector. I mean, I know there's a huge broadband incentive going in the country at the moment, and there's huge potential there to hit people with new vehicles.
That's interesting you might say that, because look, some of those sectors that you've identified there, I've had representatives on from those sectors over the last 12 months, and there's certainly growth, like food, for instance, in Wexford. There's great food companies throughout the county, and they're distributing their product across the country, and of course they'll need commercial vehicles to do that. Are you finding that consumers today are far more educated than what they were back in the boom?
Certainly. I mean, you're dealing with a customer now who almost knows as much as you about the vehicle. So you really need to tell them about your own brand, and what sets it apart from the rest. Now, the industry in general would say that the consumer comes and he hits a couple of places, so they go to X amount of garages and they get their quotes and they sit down, they digest.
No, something else that I've seen as well in the commercial vehicle market over the last year or two is vans are coming now with an awful lot of optional extras as standard.
Yeah.
Has the consumer, has the business owner driven that requirement?
Well, I think each manufacturer is trying to make themselves stand out, and what they offer to give their own unique spin on it. You'll find some manufacturers will have things like Bluetooth as standard. Obviously, you're driving along, you don't want to be picking up the phone and getting penalty points. Things like USB connectivity. You're on the road a long time, you want to listen to a podcast or charge up your phone. That's all there. Some vehicles will have cruise control as standard. Okay, so you're into 100 zone, click it on. There's not much chance of you wandering over and picking up another couple of points. And particularly if an owner is going to be the driver of the vehicle, these things are more important. I mean, if a guy is just buying it for somebody else and he's buying 10 of them or whatever and putting them on the road, it might be less important, but particularly if they're going to be driving it for themselves, these things become key. And
do you find that the demand from business owners out there is for more of a hire purchase than it is for a lease type arrangement?
It can be either or. It depends on your business model. Okay, if you have a decent bit of cash flow, and you're okay with throwing in, say, 50% of the deal, well then typically a hire purchase will work in some instances. Where the lease comes into it is, you can claim the VAT back straight away on it, basically. So you can fund the entire cost of the vehicle and put it into a monthly payment where you don't have to throw the VAT in. The benefit of the hire purchase is, you get your VAT back pretty quick in one lump sum, and some companies will kind of use it as a bit of cash flow. And to get the best finance rates, you would normally have to put in at least the VAT, but probably a bit more as well. Again, consumers are very keen with what rate of finance they're going to be paying back. So you need to compete there as well.
And my final question for you is in relation to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Are we seeing business owners out there today showing a keen interest in relation to going electric? And is the technology at a stage in which it does lend itself to business activity?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're lucky in some respects. There is a whole raft of electric commercial vehicles going to hit the market now. We're lucky in Ireland. Not a lot of people know this, but we were quick out the gates with adapting the country for electric vehicles. We were way ahead of the UK. There's actually about 1,500 charge points dotted around the country now, and you can't get to a small town in Ireland without there being one on it. If you check the ESB eCars website, you can see them all dotted around there. So there's a really good infrastructure in place at the moment. Now, there's in Wexford town here, there's 3 fast chargers at the moment, and a full, I think 6 regular chargers then as well. So, and look at any of the towns in Wexford, like Enniscorthy's covered, Gorey's covered, Bunclody is covered, So, from an infrastructure point of view, we're ready. We can take commercial electric vehicles straight away. Now, there is some on the road at the moment, and there's more coming in the second half of this year. But there's huge potential there, a huge potential. Because of the way vans are set up, they have a nice flat base in the back that can accommodate a good raft of batteries along the floor of it. It spreads the weight out, so there's huge potential for commercial vehicles there.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.